What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Eclectic Beard. So this go around, we got why Europe is insanely well designed. Here in the U.S., some of the stuff that the way they lay out cities sometimes is completely just bonkers. Whether it be some of the way they've got the one-way streets running and how you have to take and go down one-way street, one-way street to get to another one-way street to get to whatever street you're trying to get to, and feels like you're going around your elbow to get to your butthole, and just some of the infrastructure and just the way things are laid out. Like, one of the things that I find hilarious is the fact that so many people over here, especially in the state where I live, they hate roundabouts with a passion. And I prefer roundabouts to traffic lights because you just merge in and get out wherever you need to take and get out at. It's a lot simpler than just waiting at the light, and you don't have to worry about, for the most part, folks running a red light, because that doesn't happen, you know, law-abiding citizens and all that, and getting smacked, T-boned or head-on as you're going through an intersection because somebody didn't care there's a red light even though you've got the green light. That never happens, right? Never. Anyway, so we're going to take a look at this video. Let's go ahead and get into it.
This is a map of Europe's mass transit railway system across 33 countries. The yellow line...
That's, I don't know if any of y'all have ever went to use like Blender or anything like that, trying to make character models or anything of that nature, but it kind of looks like the spine or somebody's constructing something for Blender almost. It's a lot of train lines.
Indicate the presence of a train line, and as you can see, it's very dense. There are hardly any spaces where there isn't any coverage for railways. Now, if we compare this to a map of railroad tracks in the US, it's a different story. While parts of the US have some good mass transit, there are large areas of the country which isn't covered by Amtrak, the nation's largest passenger railroad service. But let me show you another map.
Yeah, it's crazy because that's one of the things that I've noticed is that the public transit, especially over in the UK, is a lot of folks don't have cars because you got the public transit over here. Like where I'm at, up the road about 45 minutes, Charleston, they've got public transport system. They've got buses and all that good stuff, but I've never had to use it. I know, living in Virginia Beach, Virginia, the whole Hampton Roads area, they've got a pretty good public transport system. Their buses and stuff of that nature. San Francisco, I know, has it. A lot of bigger cities have it. But town where I live at, you can get a bus ride from that town to the next town over, or from that town to the city of Charleston or North Charleston. But if you live out here, or I live in the sticks, forget about it. Not happening. You've got to have a car. I live outside of town. I live out in a rural area, so yeah. We don't even have, I don't even know of any bus stops. Maybe 3 bus stops total that I've seen there in Moncks Corner.
This time of high-speed rail in Europe. Now obviously, high-speed railways aren't going to be as common as regular speed railways, as they require excellent design, strict planning, and massive investment. And yet, as we can see, high-speed rail is present in Europe, which is a stark contrast to the US, as you can see from this map. While the US does have some higher speed rail, like the Aquila line in the Northeastern Corridor, it's hardly an effective map of transport solutions. And the Aquila line isn't really that fast either. It can reach about 150 miles per hour, but averages less than 70. This is not the case for Europe's insanely well-designed railroad system. And you have to remember that Europe's system accomplishes this while spanning 33 different nations in a very diverse continent. And I know what you're probably thinking. This is just because Europe is smaller than the United States, which simply isn't true. While the European Union is smaller than the US, continental Europe has an area that is about 1.04 times as much as the US. So we can dismiss this argument that the United States can't be that well designed because it's too big. Europe simply is better designed. But if you're American, you might not understand why railroad tracks or public transport as a whole is so important. I mean, driving a car works fine, right? Well, no, and Europe showcases why a primary focus on private transportation is so detrimental to a well-functioning transit system. Look at these maps. They show the US road network versus the EU's, and as you can see, the EU's road network is not nearly as impressive as the US's. And yet, when you look at some of the most congested cities in the world, European countries don't feature particularly prominently in the global rankings. This is pretty shocking information because you'd assume that the country with a more expansive road network has a lot less congestion, especially considering the United States has devoted lots of time and money to their highways.
Devoted? More like wasted. Our roads are so jacked over here, it's not even funny. Just looking at this is a 1, 2, 3, 4 lane one-way road. See, this is what I'm talking about. This right here, which looks like it leads onto another 4 lane, 1 lane road. Oh, all you can do in this town is make big ass circles. Might as well be NASCAR. We're making a left-hand turn here.
So, how come Europe is less congested when they have fewer roads? Well, it all comes down to disincentivizing the use of cars and, most importantly, making an attractive alternative. Europe does this by having both private and public transportation infrastructure, which technically the US has as well, it's just a lot worse. But on top of this, Europe makes it pretty expensive to buy, own and use a car. This is achieved by having high taxes on vehicles and gasoline. In fact, here's a map of worldwide gasoline prices. As you can see, European nations are in the top rankings, while the US lies at the bottom, charging very little. But let me be very clear, it's only a good idea to make it expensive to drive a car if you have an attractive alternative, which America doesn't, but Europe does. I mean, obviously this wouldn't work in the US with its current transportation infrastructure, but in Europe, this is a great strategy because you make the roads less congested for those who actually need them and give everyone else an affordable and efficient alternative, being Europe's amazing public transport like the trains on the railways. This is arguably the better strategy because even though the vast majority of Americans have access to vehicles at around 91% and gas is comparatively cheap, it still leaves 9% who don't have access to vehicles. What are these people who can't afford a car supposed to do? I mean, sometimes public transport isn't even an option or simply too expensive.
And see, that's the thing too, is certain cities, the public transport it's either high or it just doesn't, you don't have it. Like the town right up the road from me, like I said, there might be 3 bus stops, and I think that the buses might roll through there 3 times a day. Well, if you work in a town that's further than the next town over, unless your work schedule works to where you can actually go to the bus stop, take that bus, get off at a bus stop in a town or 2 over, and be able to get to work at a time to where you're not late for work, you're just either hanging around in that town until you have to go to work, depending on how the bus schedule runs, or you have to use Uber or something else like that. Now, out where I live, like I said, it's very rural. There's no bus stops out here. Nearest train track is like, I want to say 2 or 3 miles up the road. So that's, even if we had a train station there where you could take a train into town, that's the other thing. The train track that's down there would actually take you that actually go towards the nearest town. It goes to, where does it go? I'm trying to remember because it runs through there, goes through there. No. It actually doesn't take and go close to the nearest town, so they have to take and lay new rail lines just if they were to take and use, if they were to actually do any kind of train service from a rural area where I'm at to the nearest town. Like, they'd have to lay a whole new track because you're either going to take and go to a town 45 minutes the opposite direction or 45 minutes in either direction, really. That's the nearest place that railroad track, if I'm not mistaken, comes out at. So it's, hey, Chihuahua. maybe you'd have to take an actually walk, but that'd be like a 7-mile walk, 5 to 7 mile walk to the next closest railroad track where they could have a train station to take you into town, because that one runs right into town. But that's part of the problem is how far a lot of folks would have to walk to actually get there. Like that, they'd have to run a whole new line.
For many. So you've now actively excluded those who aren't exactly the most well off from society. To make matters worse, some US cities actually got rid of their public transport to make room for more cars. I'm not joking. American streetcars like trams were actually removed to make way for bigger roads. Absolutely insane. Compare that to Oslo, Berlin, and Madrid, where discussions are underway to restrict or even exclude most cars from the city center. And let's not forget that when you have cars, you also need somewhere to park them. And this is where things start to become rather ridiculous. You see, the United States has...
It doesn't take long to run out of room for parking at all. If you don't have the land, like you build a business, or even more, you build something, a string of shops. Well, you got to set aside land not only to build the building that the shops are going to be in. You also have to have land for water runoff. Sometimes these places have retention ponds, and if not, you've got to have spots where the cars don't run into, like don't drive on. Grassy area basically around it, so that way rainwater can be drained and it can go into the drainage system. So that's area that has to be factored in. So it's very quickly, parking can be shrunk smaller than what is feasible for the amount of shoppers you might be expecting.
Has 2 billion parking spaces for 250 million cars. That's 8 parking spaces per vehicle. In Europe, it's pretty much a 1-to-1 with around 250 million public parking spaces for 300 million cars. But to emphasize the ridiculousness of this,
250 million parking spaces for 3, so you got a deficit of 50 million. Ooh.
Even further. The area that the US dedicates for car parking is actually larger than the area dedicated for housing people. It's honestly unbelievable that people are being squeezed out of American cities due to regulators wanting to make more room for parking spaces. This simply wouldn't fly in the EU, as it has a whole policy dedicated to improving urban planning. See, the EU spent 115 billion euros between 2014 and 2020 to improve city design by making it smarter, greener, and more connected. Simply meaning they allocated funds to make their cities more efficient, more connected, and better for the environment. And better for the environment they really are, as the average resident in a typical Western US city, such as Los Angeles or Phoenix, contributes approximately 6 times more carbon to the atmosphere per capita than an average European city resident. This is purely the result of not having effective transport solutions, which saves resources and allows people to move about efficiently. And exactly that, moving about efficiently, is something most of Europe's citizens are able to do as a result of the European Union. See, most of Europe's nations are in the European Union, which gives the EU citizens a number of perks, which includes a free travel area. This has been one of the most important achievements of the EU, as it makes it possible for an EU citizen to travel freely to other EU member states and stay for up to 3 months. All they need is a passport or even just an ID card. No visas, no trips to embassies, no form filing, just head straight over. This makes it incredibly easy to travel, study, and work in other countries and communities, and having this level of centralization is very important to good design, as it gives the smartest people the opportunity to work where they are most useful. And since good design obviously requires a lot of complicated problem solving and planning, this is very smart. Another smart thing is the incredible biking infrastructure we see in Europe, perfectly illustrated by...
That's another thing here, biking lanes. There's still towns and cities with no biking lanes. If you're going to ride your bike, you're riding on the road right with cars, which is fine because that's part of the stuff that you learn whenever you're actually going for your permit or your license here, is that bike riders have as much of a right to the road as you do. The problem is they create unsafe situations sometimes with, number one, how slow they go. So, but also some of their antics they do some, you'll see them, they're supposed to take up one lane. You can have one or two right next to each other with one or two behind it. That's if there's more than one person, but I've seen them do 2 lanes, and there's only 2 lanes, and they do it out of spite. I've seen them get like pulled by cops and stuff like that. Be like, yeah, pull your bike over here, and you got to have at least one free flowing lane and stuff like that. It's one of those things. A lot of people don't like folks to ride their bikes on the road here, and even with a bike lane, they don't always use it. So, yeah.
This map of bike path density in Europe. All the purple lines are bike paths, and there's clearly a lot of them, especially towards the left side of the map, but that's just because this is the home of the Dutch, the Netherlands. Now, the funny thing is, I won't be able to compare this to a map of bike path density in the United States, because such a map hasn't been made. At least I wasn't able to find any, and I can only wonder why.
Well, most of the bike paths and bike lanes and stuff like that, like 2 towns over from me, they've got a bike path all the way down. They've got biking lanes on certain parts of the road and stuff like that. You take and go Charleston, North Charleston, Mount Pleasant, places like that. They've all got bike paths as well as biking lanes on the road that's to the right of where cars drive at. Again, just because there's a bike lane doesn't mean those people are going to use it. A lot of them just ride on the road with the cars, and that creates all kind of chaos. But we do have it, but it's a lot more restricted into where a lot of it are. They're trying to add more, but as of right now, a lot of it's restricted, and it's a city by city and, municipality by municipality on not only their policy but their views and stuff like that on it. So,
but anyway, what Europe and also the European Union has achieved is pretty remarkable, as it's hard to think of another set of such diverse countries where you would be able to travel so freely, in an efficient and inexpensive manner. I mean, you can literally get from Paris to Amsterdam, for example, in just 3 hours for around $30. Imagine being able to travel all over Asia without any...
How far is Paris to Amsterdam? 320 miles or 515 kilometers. If you were to take a bus system or get a train ticket 320 miles away from here, it's going to cost you at least $100. Greyhound might be cheaper. Might be like $60 for Greyhound. But I've done Greyhound before, and no thanks. I'd walk before I was do that again. I'd walk the full 320 miles or hitchhike. Not even playing. Ooh. To heck with Greyhound. After this video, due to all the green screen not wanting to work right, I'm going to have to figure something out. So my apologies for that in this video, but here we go.
Any border crossings, checks, or visas, and being able to stay for months at a time. That would be truly amazing. And let's not forget that European design has always been distinctive and very successful. In fact, the continent's history of design and interconnectedness serves as a model for the rest of the world. But even though Europe and the EU are pretty great and have amazing infrastructure, they obviously aren't perfect. And I'd love to hear some of the reasons it might not be, so leave a comment down below if you have some thoughts on this. But that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
There we have it. Why Europe is insanely well designed. I'm gonna be honest with you, there's a lot of places around here in the US. There are cities and towns that are well designed here. They've got really good infrastructure, really good public transport systems in place. But I think a lot of this goes back to mindset as well. That sense of independence and freedom that a car gives someone. Not only that, but also individuality and things of that nature. For a lot of folks, the car is an extension of themselves. So I think a lot of that goes into it as well. And I think that's one of the reasons why maybe, now there are a lot of cities that are investing a lot more. They've started investing more money here in the last 5-10 years in beefing up their public transport, beefing up, just everything in general as far as trying to make sure everything's more free flowing and things of that nature. So I mean, but just looking at some of the pictures, and I say pictures, some of the like the overview, the bird's eye view shots, and wow, that's a lot of houses in a very, everything looks so compact, but I could see that packed in into that much of into that bit of area. I could see the reason why there'd be so much access to public transport. It would just make more sense. There's not a whole lot of room with all those buildings for parking. Just saying. So, at some point in time, I'm going to make it to the UK. I'm going to make it to a couple of different countries in Europe as well. That is definitely in the cards. Just because I want to take and experience places outside the U.S. So that being said, y'all be good to each other. Love yourselves. Peace.